Let's look at the value in life coaching. You're going to be bringing a lot of value to people. And first, we're going to look at the value that you're going to bring people in their business. Because let's face it, when you're hired as a life coach, someone's paying for you to come in there and do something. So in most cases, there'll be some business reason why you're hired. Very unlikely that you'll get a large percentage of clients who want to hire you for personal reasons. It will happen, but it's very unlikely that that will be the huge percentage. Odds are the majority of your clients are going to be business professionals of some sort, and there's some kind of business angle that they've hired you for. They're going to benefit financially somehow from what you do for them. So you should be bringing value to their business, and value to business usually is measured in money. The value that you'll bring, as you know already, is going to be measured in a number of ways, but unfortunately, the businesses you hire or the people who are business professionals who hire you are going to be looking at the bottom line. They're going to be looking at how much money you're bringing them in most cases. And the reality is that if you're not delivering, if the revenues are not going up, then you will not be a life coach for that business or that person for very long. So keep yourself sharp and make sure you're focused on what they are focused on. I always say look at the instrument panel. You know, like on an airplane, if there's fog or what have you, you look at the instrument panel to see how level you are, how high up you are, which way you're facing, and so forth. If you're looking at a different instrument panel than they are, let's say you're looking at how good you think they feel, and they're looking at how much money they're making, and they're feeling good, so you're happy, but they're not making money, so they're really planning on firing you. You need to start looking at the instrument panel that they are looking at, because that's all that matters. There's a good feeling you have, doesn't matter quite as much as what matters to them. If what matters to them is the good feeling, fine, go for the good feeling. But if what matters to them is the money, then be sure to focus on that. So when you're working on entrepreneurial and small business development, that's usually what you're focusing on. It's usually what's going on. They're focused on making more money over the long haul. Now, in many cases, they're interested in general efficiency that's going to contribute to monetary efficiency. So sometimes they just want everyone to get along, and they want you to come in there and help with that in more of a consulting capacity. But in most cases, if you're on the job, there's going to be a dollar amount that they're looking for you to increase. Let's look at career planning and development. When you are working with a business, career planning and development is going to come strongly into play. You are going to be helping an individual in many cases, usually an individual who is part of a company, but in many cases you're going to be helping the individual, and you're going to help them move forward in some way. Sometimes you'll be helping an entire company, but many times when you're in a business setting, you're working with an individual, an insurance agent, for example, who is not making the cold calls that he or she should be making per week, and they want to make more because they want to make more money. So that ties into career planning and development. What it's really called is getting them motivated to get up and make some phone calls, but it falls under the larger housing of career planning and development. You're helping them plan and develop their career in the sense that they are going to make more calls, they're going to make more money, they're going to advance themselves. They're planning on making new calls, planning on getting new clients, planning on making more money, and that is developing their career as well. Now, that's a very basic and simple example, but in many cases, that's what you'll be called in to do. You'll be called in to get Joe or Sally to just start making more calls, just start contacting more people, just start seeing more people, just getting organized, following through is a big area that you'll be called in to help with. Getting people to follow through, because many times people start things and they just don't follow through. And for me, that was revelation when I realized that as a hypnotherapist, I also needed to be a cheerleader of sorts. I needed to get people to follow through. It's one thing to say exercise, it's another thing to actually make sure they do it. So life coaching for me really kicked in when I realized that I need to get people to follow through. So that's all housed under that larger category of career planning and development. You are going to be, in most cases, not working with weight loss clients like a hypnotherapist would, but working with someone who is interested in moving up within the company and has sought outside help, meaning you. You have come in, you are there to bring some value to the table in terms of career planning and development. You're going to get a plan together and you're going to help them develop it. You're going to help them move forward. So keep in mind that that's generally what you're working under when you're working with a business. Motivation and time management. These are huge, huge, huge things that you will be doing a lot of. Motivation and time management. Trust me when I say that if these people could do it without you, they would. But they have found themselves in a situation where it's difficult for them to do it without you. It's difficult for them to get motivated and get excited about what's going on and see the future and see the possibilities. They've lost sight of that. They've lost sight of how all their actions are actually contributing to something great and wonderful. They've lost their motivation, or perhaps they never really had it. So you need to come in and give them motivation. And it's not just coming in and saying, hey, get up out of bed and do this and do that, because when I say you'll be down in the trenches, usually you won't be that far down. Usually you won't be with them when they're waking up in the morning. You may give them a call after you think they're up to make sure they're up, make sure they're doing the right thing and not spacing out or doing something else other than what they should be doing. But in most cases, you will be motivating them. You will be coming up with a plan that motivates them, perhaps creating a system of rewards that they can give themselves. In many cases, the people you work with will have tremendous assets. They will have a lot of money. And so you giving them little rewards is probably not going to mean as much to them as you telling them that they can spend their own money and buy a boat for themselves or an airplane for themselves if they do this, and getting them to agree to that. That becomes motivation. So it's not as if they're just going to go out and get these things whenever they want, even though they could. They are going to work the acquiring of those things into a motivation plan. And let's look at time management. You are going to find that the people you work with are probably some of the worst time managers that you can possibly imagine, and you're going to wonder how they ever got that far, how they ever got that position. How did they ever get hired by anyone? Because they're so poor at managing time. Now, you're not going to say that to them unless you have tremendous rapport with them, but in most cases, you're going to realize that they're just all over the place. They're just scattered. They've got this going on, that going on. They don't know when their next meeting is. They miss meetings. That's why you have come in. In many cases, you're going to come in at the point at which someone is in crisis, and perhaps they are actually in jeopardy of losing their position or losing their job or losing a tremendous amount of money because of their lack of time management combined with their lack of motivation. So you are going to bring value in the form of getting them motivated and giving them time management skills. Let's look at creativity for artists, writers, musicians, and performers. Not everyone you're going to be working with in business is someone who's wearing a suit and tie and carrying a briefcase and showing up to work and sitting in a cubicle or a nice corner office with a view of the city or a view of the mountains. Not everyone fits that description. Some people work at home. Some people are artists. Some people work around the world. Some people are on stage all the time. Some people are professional musicians that everyone's heard of. You are going to be working with these people, and you're going to find that they're a little different than working with your average business person. They're still business people, though, and they still generate a tremendous amount of money. Every famous person you know is essentially a business person. They are generating a tremendous amount of money. So whether they consider themselves to be in a business or not, they are. Other people are depending on them. They are part of the machinery that makes many people's lives work. Without the artists, writers, musicians, and performers who are well-known and highly paid, a lot of people would be unemployed. People who go out there and they're out in front of the public and they're well-known are usually generating a tremendous amount of money. By the time everyone in the streets knows somebody's name, that person is usually generating a tremendous amount of money. However, as with any person involved in business, they can go astray. And you can bring value to them in the form of coaching. And when you bring value to them, realize that a lot of people benefit. When it's someone who is well known, then all their fans benefit, of course, if they write the next book because of you motivating them and getting them to manage their time. If they write the next book, a lot of people benefit from that. Or if a musician writes the next song, or a creative artist of any kind does the next thing, whatever it is, a lot of people win when your client wins. But realize that when you deal with people like this, people who are involved in business, yet they're very creative, you need a different approach. They're not going to want the same approach that the lady with the nice dress and the briefcase is going to want. She's going to want something that is fairly regimented, and that's okay. A person who's involved in business in the capacity of a creative artist or writer, musician, or any kind of performer is going to want the organization to come in a different form, and they're not going to want you to schedule everything too rigidly in most cases. So keep that in mind. Let's look at the value in life coaching in personal life coaching. Personal life coaching. Sometimes people will hire you to help them in their personal lives, in their relationships, in their intimacy, in getting their act together to go out and date, in working with their spouse, in getting back together with their loved one whom they've broken up with. So keep in mind now, you're not a therapist or a counselor unless you are otherwise qualified, but you won't be as virtue of this program, perhaps some other program. But if you're not qualified as a therapist or counselor, realize that it is beyond your realm of expertise to really get down and psychoanalyze them, for example. If you feel that it needs to get down to that level, then you need to refer them out to a counselor or therapist if they don't already have one. And always keep a few numbers handy in your area of all kinds of professionals: psychiatrists, psychologists, tax planners, financial managers, CPAs, all kinds of people. People you can refer your client to if they need some specific help. I don't want you to try to be the accountant and the counselor and the tax advisor. I want you to be the person who's motivating them and getting them to create a plan and move forward with it. So when it comes to relationships and intimacy, realize that you are helping them get some kind of plan together, helping them move forward in dating, or helping them get closer to their loved one, or something along those lines. What you're not doing is analyzing their dreams or performing some sort of in-depth long-term therapy with them in which you're having them draw shapes and interpret what they see or anything like that. So you're not becoming a therapist for them. You are there for them. You are their friend first and foremost, but their friend as a professional, sort of a friend they pay for. And that sounds a little harsh perhaps, but you have to really keep this dividing line in mind. You're not the friend they can call up any time and talk to at no charge. Perhaps you have a policy where they can call you up a certain amount of times per day or something like that, and you limit it to that. But they're not supposed to be in a situation with you where they say, hey, let's go have a beer at the local bar, and and then you do that again the next night, and then eventually you're getting drunk with them and so forth. So that's not what's supposed to happen. Now, meeting them for a beer at the local bar is fine because you're not a licensed therapist or counselor. If you were, that would be a no-no. As a life coach, you have more flexibility. So you actually can do something like that, but you're not making a habit of it. You're not becoming their drinking buddy. You're not infiltrating their groups. You're not becoming a member of the social groups that they're in, except to the extent that it helps you work with them. Sometimes you'll have to interact somewhat with their friends and their business associates, of course, but you're not joining every group they join. You're not becoming their tennis buddy and their drinking buddy and so forth and so on. You're putting reasonable professional limits on this. But at the same time, you will be working with them on their relationships and intimacy when you work on a personal level in coaching. Let's look at the idea of spirituality and personal growth. Spirituality and personal growth are something that you can actually help them with when you do some personal coaching. Now, you may think, wait a minute, I'm not a guru. I'm not coming in here and being their spiritual guru, am I? Well, not necessarily, but in a sense, you kind of can be, because as a life coach, you have a lot of flexibility. You can be a lot of different things. Although you're not going too in-depth in any one field, perhaps you have a specialty in your life that you're into spirituality and personal growth. These are not technical terms. These are not terms that are licensed. There's no licensed spiritual guide that I know of, so you're not risking getting in trouble for being their spiritual guide. If you happen to know how to read tarot cards, for example, or you happen to be psychic, or you happen to work with numerology or anything like that, bring it in as long as they're okay with it. Now, if you're working with someone in a personal capacity, but they're fairly strict business-wise, and you say, hey, I've got some tarot cards, why don't I do a tarot reading? If they're not into that, or if their religion is opposed to that, you could very well lose a client. They may think, what is this crazy person talking about? Tarot cards? Are you kidding me? So let them mention it. If they're into what you are into spiritually, then by all means incorporate it, because there's no limit to what you can do in terms of offering spiritual advice, as long as you're okay with that, as long as that's your thing. And you could very well set yourself up as the life coach who offers spiritual guidance that contributes to personal growth. So if you are into that, and more importantly, if they are into that, then feel free to bring it in. And this could go into all sorts of different realms, psychic readings, working with pendulums, numerology, reading their aura, things of that nature. Sometimes life coaches have other interests that have to do with metaphysical fields. If you are one of those people, and your client happens to mention that they are into it, then you should pursue that with them if you want to. Now, I don't recommend that you put that on a flyer and say, hey, I'm into tarot cards and psychic readings and aura reading and so forth, because a lot of people look at that and they think it looks unprofessional. They think it looks kind of wacky, actually. So a lot of people have a prejudice against that, unfortunately. So I wouldn't put that out there, but I would listen for what they say. If they're into it and you're into it, then go for it. Let's look at the value that you bring in life coaching, personal life coaching, when it comes to stress management and balance. These are huge topics also, just like time management and organization, getting people all organized and getting them together. Those things can be a challenge for people, and in many cases, you're going to find that that's the number one reason they hired you, but also stress management and balance. Sometimes people have a lot going on, and they just don't know where to put all the pieces. They've just got a bunch of balls they're trying to juggle, and it seems like all the balls are either up in the air or they've all fallen down. It never seems like there's a good flow. A good juggler can juggle a lot of balls, maybe 5 balls, 6 balls, who knows? I've seen jugglers juggle a lot of balls and a lot of different things. I've seen jugglers juggle chainsaws, in fact. So jugglers can juggle a lot. But if your client is not skilled at juggling a lot of things, then they're going to make a big mess of everything quickly. And a lot of times that's what happens. A lot of times you walk in right after all the balls have just fallen to the ground. and there's just a mess, and there's your client standing right in the middle of them all, maybe 20 different balls they tried to keep up in the air. They've all fallen down, and you get called in, and they say, hey, here's the challenge. All of these need to be up in the air, spinning nicely, with me smiling beneath them and moving them along. Ready, go. That's going to be your job. So realize that a lot of the time when this happens, it comes down to stress management. They just really don't have the skills necessary to manage the stress, because sometimes the further along you go, the more stress you have. You have a few things going on at first, then you get a few more things going on, then you get a few more things going on, and then the next thing you know, your life is like a big whirlwind until you call the life coach. You show up with your cape on, and you save the day. So you are going to be dealing with stress management and helping people with their balance. And realize that some of the people you work with are going to have unreasonable, at least it'll seem to you, they're going to have unreasonable reactions to the situations that happen. You're going to think, well, hey, that just happened to you. I mean, that's no big deal really, but they are going to flip out. So get ready for that, because they lack the quality, the skill of stress management. So you are going to, in many cases, be teaching them that. In some cases, you're not. In some cases, people are just not going to learn stress management. You're just going to have to deal with the fact that they don't deal with stress well. And that's the way it is. You're going to have to be okay with that. But in many cases, you're going to be working with stress management and balance. You're also going to be working with motivation and confidence. And this is on a personal level, but it's also on a business level, because those are two things that really contribute to someone being successful in pretty much anything they do. I remember when I first started making hypnotherapy recordings. Some of the first recordings I made were on motivation and confidence. I think it was weight loss, smoking cessation, which means getting someone to stop smoking, motivation, and confidence. I believe those are the first 4 I ever produced. And now I've got thousands of recordings, but I realized that I needed to do those early on, because people want that. They want motivation. They want confidence. With motivation and confidence, you can do anything. You can go to the moon. I don't care if you're in the space program or not. You can find a way to get to the moon when you are motivated and confident. There's always a way to do it. If you're not motivated, you're not confident, you're not going to go anywhere. Nothing's going to happen. And in many cases, that's where your clients are going to be. They're lacking motivation and or they're lacking confidence. Motivation and confidence work hand in hand. One helps the other. So when you work on one, the other one benefits. For example, if I get motivated and I decide I'm going to fly somewhere and do something, and I fly somewhere and do it and it works out, I become more confident. I realize, hey, I can do this. Wow, I've got a skill I didn't know. I can make this happen. I become more confident. Or if I suddenly wake up one morning and I've got a burst of confidence, that's going to motivate me to do something, to take action, because confidence demands action. When you have confidence, you have to do something with it. It's not just going to sit there and do nothing. It's going to do something. So they work together, hand in hand. So realize that in many cases, you're going to be working with people to develop their motivation and confidence. You're going to bring that value to them on a personal level, but you're also going to bring that value to them on a professional level. They're also going to be able to see professionally how those things really contribute to them making more calls if they're an insurance agent, for example, or doing whatever they need to do in their business to make it go to the next level. They're going to see the value in that. So when you bring motivation and confidence to the table, you bring two really heavy hitters to the table. And when you allow a person to reach into themselves and bring out their confidence and motivation, you really allow them to bring out something powerful, something amazing, something that's going to benefit them in every aspect of their lives, business and personal. Time management is something that I mentioned that you're going to be working with them on in business, but you're also going to be working with them on time management in a personal setting. they are going to learn from you. You're going to bring the value to them of time management. Time management is something that's very helpful in every area of your life. But when we look at it in a personal setting and the value of coaching in a personal setting, time management really gets down to making use of every part of our lives. Sometimes people just waste time when they go home. Sometimes they're very organized at work and they get a lot done and they're very productive and so forth. And they go home and they veg out in front of the TV for hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. Then they fall asleep. Sometimes they pass out in front of the TV, or sometimes they go home and drink themselves into a stupor. They're not managing their personal time very well. I'm not saying that they have to be doing something quote unquote productive every second of every day, but they should at least be compartmentalizing what's going on. For example, if they go home and they really don't want to do anything, that's fine. No one's going to make them do anything. But there should be some kind of a limit on it. It's their free time. They don't have to be productive all the time. They can relax. No one's going to get onto them for relaxing a little bit, especially at the end of the day, but they need to be honest with themselves. And they need to say, hey, I'm going to relax now for 5 hours. Not, I'm going to go home and I'm going to work on this, but I think I'll watch TV first. If they know that they're not going to get to that thing and all they're going to do is watch TV, that can be okay, as long as they acknowledge that that time is rest time. There's a big difference in that, because when you want to do something and you say you're going to do it and you tell your life coach you're going to do it and you go home and you just watch TV for 5 hours instead of watching TV for a little while and then doing it, you lose twice. Actually, the client loses twice, because first of all, they don't do it. Second of all, they have the stress the whole time they're watching TV is thinking, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. Guilt-free free time is very beneficial. Guilty free time is not. So if they're having free time in which they're not going to do anything, that's fine. But it needs to be structured that way. It needs to be set out that way. Okay, here's 5 hours for you to do whatever you want. You don't have to do anything. There's nothing due. You don't have to create anything or even think about anything if you don't want. All you have to do is whatever you want to do, or nothing at all. Ready, go. Okay, so that can be time management. They have stress-free playtime. Time management is very important in the personal life. Finances and budgeting. My goodness, you are going to come across this quite a bit. Now, in many cases, people who hire you, especially if you charge a reasonably high fee, which I suggest you do, I suggest you charge at least somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 per hour or more, so that you're dealing with people who are really serious about using your services. That's what I suggest that you do, that you set that as a minimum. However, you will still, in many cases, be dealing with people who are just not good with money. They're not good with finances. They're not good with budgeting. They're not good with money in general. They'll waste money. And sometimes these things are huge. If people have a lot of money, then sometimes they'll buy boats that they don't need. Sometimes they'll buy houses that they don't need. Sometimes they'll buy things that depreciate quickly that they probably shouldn't have bought, and they're sabotaging themselves because they're just not good with money. They're not aware of how much money they're spending. So no matter what scale it's on, whether they're spending a little bit of money or a lot of money, if they are spending it and they don't want to spend it and it's actually hurting them in some way, then you can come in to help in that regard. And in many cases, you're going to find that people you deal with are really challenged when it comes to dealing with finances and budgeting, and they don't have much of a grasp on that, so you can really help them tremendously. One of the things I recommend that I've already told you is that you keep a list of professionals handy, professionals that you're going to refer them to. The reason for this is that you are not an expert in everything. If you happen to be an accountant or, better yet, a CPA, then that's great. If you're not, or if you don't want to be their accountant or CPA, then I suggest that you have one handy you can refer them out to. You can say, I'm not an expert with finances either, but Bill is, or Sally is, and here's their card, and you can call them, and they're going to help you get all this in order. When can you commit to doing that? So you get them to commit to doing that, but you're not part of the process. You're just the motivator. You're just the person who's getting them to do it. You're not the person who's going to be handling that for them, and that's okay. So in many cases, finances and budgeting can be dealt with in that way. You're going to get them to work with the person who's going to help them do it, the person who's going to organize them and get them moving forward. This is a key factor. In fact, failure to do this, if they need help with this, can cause you to lose your job, cause you to lose your position with them. You are hired as an outside contractor in many cases, and you are optional. So keep in mind always, I always focus on that, keep in mind what they are most interested in, and most of the time, they really need to get this part of their lives together. Health, aging, lifestyle, and self-care. You are going to come across these as well. You're going to be dealing with people who are getting older, or sometimes they have a physical ailment, or sometimes they just need some extra help dealing with the things that have to do with health and taking care of themselves and so forth. So this covers a lot of ground. Sometimes you'll be called to be a life coach for someone who has a disability of some sort, or sometimes a terminal illness, or sometimes just something that's really slowing them down health-wise. You're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to be okay with that. Sometimes you're going to have to deal with elderly people, people who are having difficulty getting around because of their advanced age, because over time the body tends to break down. It's a normal process. But sometimes your very wealthy clients are actually some of your oldest clients, some of your clients who are the furthest along in age, that are furthest along in money, and they're the furthest along in age, and that's okay. But you are going to have to deal with that, so keep that in mind. You're going to bring value to their lives in terms of coaching them through that. And maybe that's not the main thing they want to work on. Maybe that's just something that's going on with them. They happen to have health problems, or they happen to be aging. And that's not even what they want help with, because perhaps they have a nurse for that. But it's part of the equation, part of what you are dealing with. So realize that. Sometimes you're going to have to get into the realm of self-care, meaning them caring for themselves. And sometimes this comes up in interesting ways. Sometimes, for example, they don't groom themselves properly. Sometimes they don't take proper care of themselves. They're just not really looking out for themselves. They're not dressing appropriately. They're not washing their hair. Perhaps they're not getting regularly scheduled haircuts or hairstylings. They're wearing clothes that are inappropriate or ineffective for certain situations. So in many cases, you're going to have to either call in a consultant or give the advice yourself. I don't necessarily think that when it comes to clothing, you need to call in a person who specializes in that, a consultant per se. However, you definitely can give them some pointers yourself. And if you don't have any fashion sense, which for me tends to be a challenge personally, so if you're like me and you don't have a whole lot of fashion sense, then you may want to call in some outside help, or at least ask a friend how to help them out. So realize that you can be of tremendous value in those areas. And finally, family and parenting. Many times, a person will call you in as a life coach when they're a divorced mother of 3 kids. Husband is gone. He has the kids part-time, so he's not completely out of the picture, but he's not in the household, and he's not anyone who you will be interacting with. And they need help organizing that. They've got a family, and they are parents, and those balls that they have to juggle, as I mentioned earlier, are just not staying up in the air for them. They've got a few kids, they've got some in-laws to deal with, they've got the ex to deal with, they've got bills to deal with, they've got perhaps a career to deal with, and you come in and you're expected to organize everything and get everything back up in the air and flowing properly. Sometimes that scenario will evolve. Sometimes it'll be a situation in which it's a family that's fully intact, meaning there's a husband and wife or a loving couple, and they may or may not have kids, and there's a family unit there. Everyone's together and so forth, but things just aren't working out quite right. so-and-so's missing his soccer games, and the other kid's missing softball games, and one of the kids has failing grades, and the husband never seems to be able to get his work done at the office in time to see the soccer game, and the wife has a busy career as a pediatrician, and she has a lecture tour she's supposed to go on, but she doesn't think she's going to be able to do it because she's so far backed up writing the book that she's trying to write. So sometimes you get into a lot of very interesting issues when dealing with family and parenting that go way beyond what you may have ever thought possibly could go wrong in a family. But they've got all of these things that are kind of crumbling, and you're invited into the disaster that has happened, and your job is to sweep up everything and put all the furniture back in place and the spackling in the walls, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, of course, in their lives, and get everything functioning like it used to function. They're going to tell you how it used to be or how it ideally would look to them. And if they're both busy professionals, you can rest assured they're both going to be demanding. And that's okay. Demanding clients are kind of nice to work with because they keep you on your toes. Your job is to keep them on their toes. They, by virtue of paying you money, want to make sure that you stay on your toes. So everyone kind of gets on the same page when you have two very successful parents working together. They're both going to be your boss, and it gets kind of interesting, but there's a lot of energy there. So get excited and get ready to help people, to bring value to them in their business lives and their personal lives.